Been saying our speakers today are Renee Carter and Traci Wilson-Kleekamp with Race Matters Friends. They will share what Columbia citizens need to know about Columbia City Charter and our council city manager form of government. Susan Renee Carter is the president of Race Matters Friends. She has a Master's of Science in Clinical Psychology from Central Missouri State University and 37 years of experience working directly with persons from marginalized communities and training and supervising staff who work directly with members of those communities. At Trans State Institute in Sedalia, Renee provided therapy to families, children, and foster parents through the state of Missouri's Children's Division funding from 1988 to 1991. From 1991 to 1992, at the Center of Human Services, she was the parent training therapist in a residential apartment setting, teaching parenting skills and helping clients navigate systems to advocate or to access resources. From 1992 to 1994, Renee was an individualized supported living supervisor at the Center for Human Services. In this role, she trained and supervised staff working with individuals with developmental disabilities in a residential setting and helped clients navigate systems to access needed resources. In August 1994, Renee moved to Columbia, where she began to work for Boone County Family Resources as a support coordinator, providing case management to individuals with developmental disabilities, helping them access needed services. In 2021, she moved to a position with Boone County Family Resources of Supervisor of Life and Work Connections, and she was later promoted to Program Manager, where she was responsible for program development, supervising and training staff who trained clients and in work and daily living skills, self-advocacy, and community access, assisting clients in finding and keeping jobs. Renee collected and analyzed the team's data and worked with staff to improve outcomes for clients. Renee participated in meetings of various consortiums of service providers to also improve outcomes and to coordinate with others in the community who are working with the same populations. Renee was also a certified work incentive practitioner and as an IPS, individual placement and supports employment supervisor. Under Renee's leadership, Boone County Family Resources received exemplary reviews 2 years in a row for its employment services. She also helped pilot a new model of summer work experience programs for teens through Missouri Vocational Rehabilitation. Since spring 2019, she has been engaged in education and advocacy through Race Matters Friends. She became vice president in summer of 2022 and president in spring of 2023. Her duties include attending city, county, and state government meetings, and also things like book clubs and other events to provide education and advocacy. She also meets with community members to promote equity. She collects and analyzes data related to organizational activities. Welcome, to, Renee, and now I'll go ahead with Traci's bio, introduction. Dr. Traci Wilson-Kleekamp has been a neighborhood and community activist for over 20 years, advocating for community oriented policing, public parks, transparent and responsive local government, and sustainable urban planning. She is currently the vice president of Race Matters Friends, a nonprofit organization focused on social justice advocacy, specifically issues of equity and inclusion. Traci was the organization's founding president. She is an avid genealogist and family history research consultant who helps family historians discover more about their African American heritage. She is featured on the Missouri State Archives website, African American Genealogy, Putting Together Pieces of Your Past, a 5-part series with Traci Wilson-Kleekamp. She hosts a blog at Traci Liz's Genealogy blog and Diversity Gleanings. Wilson-Kleekamp, the descendants of Celia and Robert Newsom Speak, explored family memories and oral histories of Celia, an enslaved woman who was hanged in 1855 for killing her owner, Robert Newsom. Wilson-Kleekamp also designed the cover art for a special issue, Summer of 2020, of Genealogy. In May 2025, Traci graduated with a PhD in philosophy from the University of Missouri College of Education and Human Development. Also from MU, she obtained a graduate certificate in qualitative research and a Master's of Education in Social Studies Education. She has a BA in journalism and public relations from California State University at Long Beach, California. She wrote a 2019 blog, which is featured on Christine Sleeter's website, Esoteric Clues. It's no secret that slave owners fathered children with their slaves. More recently, Traci was featured on KOMU Channel 8 for Black History Month in a story about James T. Scott, who was lynched in Colombia in 1923. She addressed the narrative violence that surrounds the manner in which the story of Scott is told. Welcome, Traci, and welcome to you both, and we're ready to begin.
Thank you
Hello,
very
Renee.
much. Yes, I'm here.
Right.
There's Traci. We found her.
So I'm typically really bad with using Zoom, so everybody bear with me. Hopefully when I share my screen and do the things I'm supposed to do, it works properly. Yes, I'm Traci Wilson-Kleekamp. Just for fun, I gave you some documents that you can look at later for study. They came along with our press release. And I also have a short PowerPoint presentation. And if there's time later when we're asking questions, I'll move around with some other things. But anyway, I'm Traci Wilson-Kleekamp, and I wanted to begin by showing you a document that sort of led us into this conversation about charter review. And so we are not taking a position about what should be done to the charter. What we want people to understand is there is a charter that guides how our council and city manager should act as professionals, and that our city council members are the boss, basically, of the city manager. So the documents that you'll see in here are from our first meeting and what we discussed, and then there's some summary documents there as well. And I just tried to download a file, which I hope works. But for the heck of it, let me see if my screen sharing efforts will work. Let me see if that'll work. I asked for permission to share. So let's see if that actually happens.
Yes, any participant may share one at a time.
Okay, so let me see if my screen will actually
You see your,
do what it's supposed to do. And your screen sharing, and I can't see what anybody's seeing on the other end of over there. But does this show up from on your end? It's the
yeah, I see
Charter
the PowerPoint. It hasn't started the presentation, but it's
Right.
the startup screen.
Right. So let me see. Why is my computer being weird here? Okay, so this is just a quick overview of charter cities, and we will leave this with you. This is on the Model Charter Cities website, and anybody from the public can use this. I'm gonna kind of fly through it, and then but we will leave it with you so that you all can discuss it later. And the National Civic League has a long history of innovation. It started by Teddy Roosevelt in 1984, and Louis Brandeis, Frederick Law Olmsted, and Mary Munford. And they established a model charter city. It was a city manager form of government, and it was a way of reforming the patronage system, but also to put public health as a priority, right? So this organization actually helps communities all over the United States work on professionalizing their local government, but also helping them improve their engagement with their citizens through communication. So right now they have the 9th edition of the Model Charter Cities out. They've used it for 120 years, and its emphasis on equity and engagement. And this is kind of interesting because in the past it was about efficiency, and equity is a new framework that they've added to what city managers do. And why did they do that? A good example is Webster Groves. The city of Webster Groves recently made some changes to their charter where they added a component that required public engagement, but also they have had a long history of redlining. And they said if people had deeds that had redlining, which are racial covenants and restrictions, that they would remove those covenants from their deed if they brought them to the clerk. So that was a big deal for them to make that shift. And so this model charter cities is online, but we have it in our folder so that you have it to look through. And what is a charter city? It's the governing document of a municipality. It sets the city's policies and values, their policy values and values. And it's also the authority for which the city derives its power, and also sets the government structure and also the procedures for elections and things like that. It's foundational, durable, instructional. And then what is an ordinance? It's something that's adopted by council, and we see that all the time at our city council meetings. And it provides legal mechanisms for taxation, zoning, and public safety. And it creates rules for everybody to abide by. And also is the code for managing departments and et cetera. And then there's a city code that's a collection of all the ordinances that are bound by the city's charter. And really the purpose is to make the laws accessible and organized in a single document so that people can look them up. So there's a charter and an ordinance and a city code so that you can see how these are used. And moving into the charter, they talk about charter do's and don'ts, about plain do's, using plain language and being concise, um, um, that kind of stuff. Provide guarantees of public values, limits on government overreach, um, those kinds of things. And also don't use the charter for short-term policy fixes, freeze the city in time, leave important values unspecified or underprotected, and then also determining what goes where. And we are not at that point of having this conversation about what goes there. This is literally just to give you all an idea that there is this whole body of conversation about charters and equity and public participation before you do the process, which the reason we got involved in this is that a group of people started talking about charter reform very quietly, not publicly. And we thought that that was not a move that would help build trust, but also if people didn't know what the city charter was, they wouldn't be able to engage in the deliberations very effectively. They would be reacting actually to what was being put to them. And then the other one is embedding equity and participation in the charter revision process. So if we decided to embark on a charter revision process, these are some do's and don'ts of how to get that process going and then what to do afterwards. And a great example of this, again, is Webster Groves, which has all of their charter reform activities on their website, their surveys, etc. So you can check that out when you have a chance. And then also looking at the engagement for their commissions. We have lots of boards and commissions. There is some critique in this town, and I'm one of them, that our city doesn't actively and aggressively take in the advice and work of our boards and commissions. They seem to be very separated. A recent example is that a decision was made about risk management and moving risk management from finance to the law department, and the Finance and Audit Committee was not advised that this was happening. And Maria Oropio was the chair of that committee, and she went to council and brought this up, and it turned into a very strange conundrum. But the result is that the finance director sort of came out and was disrespectful to Maria, and she ended up resigning from the board, I'm told. So that's not how it should go, but that's what happened. And I think the way our news gets reported, we might be getting left out of the loop about that. You can read more about it on Como Buzz. And then lastly, the issue here of equity. It's a statement of charter principles that includes equity, gender neutral language in the charter and beyond, requirement that budget proposals from departments address equity, provisions for outreach to underrepresented populations, departmental requirements to consider equity in planning and services, requirements that cabinets and other leaders reflect the diversity of their population. And then these are here, just a little tracking here of inserting equity and engagement into the city charter. Why is equity important? Because I think everyone knows that there was a long period of time where we lived under segregation. And so there are many communities in the current day that have impacts because of those decisions. And so this is a way to go back and address the inequities that we have in our respective communities. So I'm going to switch just a little bit to say this is the National League of Cities website. This is where I got the slide deck from, right here. And you can download a copy of it, but it reviews again what I just read through about equity, public engagement, elections, city managers. This part's kind of interesting and new. The introduction adds new commentary on the role of city managers as innovators and non-political facilitators of partnerships among city government, nonprofit groups, and community resident groups, and underscores the accountability of the professional manager to the council and the public. And also another modification that's new, the model seeks to clarify the role of a city attorney as the sole legal officer for the city as an organization, and not to the council, manager, or agencies of the government as separate clients. So for those of you who are new to this conversation, those are all new things to discuss. Now, I'm going to move to my presentation a little bit here. I've not done this before, launching from Canvas. So we'll see how this goes. This is our kind of, hello, everybody. How are you doing? So kind of a recap of where we're at. We want systems and performance to work effectively and efficiently together. So if you're watching what's going on right now, there's a conversation about a 1% sales tax to support police and fire. And if you're paying attention about the budget, you know that almost half of our general fund supports police and fire. And for many years, our city was not paying into the pension fund for the police and fire. And so now they have this huge unfunded pension debt of like 156 million. And the police department, facilities, and fire have also been neglected. So they want to pass this tax to give them some more money. But I think at the end of the day, they want to pass this 1% tax so that they have some leverage in terms of bonds to shore up this pension fund that's languishing. And so they're promising a lot with this 1%. From an equity perspective, I would argue that 50% of our general fund going to public safety is not a sustainable, mechanism, and that other things that we need to serve the needs of people are getting the short shrift because of that. And also, the city manager inherited these problems, and so how do we get our systems to work more efficiently and effectively, given the decisions that were made in the past? We want accountability from our leadership. This is one of the things that was brought up about the tax from the Let's Talk Local is, well, why didn't you tell us that you are having trouble managing your reserves and that you were getting short on your reserves? So the city has a rule that they set aside 20% above 20% of a particular fund as a reserve. But the city has been having so much trouble financially, they're actually eating into those reserves, which is very dangerous. And so the question is, how is the city showing that they're responsible and accountable for keeping us in the loop on those types of challenges? We want to trust our city manager. One of the things that we saw recently that concerned us is that the council had a retreat in December, and it came out that at least 3 council members, Valerie, Vera, and Jackie, had been trying to have a meeting with their colleagues to develop a communications response that they were all a part of in response to the shooting that happened in downtown. And it took them probably until January to have a meeting because they didn't get a response from the mayor and the city manager to acquiesce to a meeting. And so this tension came out at their retreat meeting in December. And I had also noticed that on at least one occasion when Valerie Carroll had pressed the city manager for some answers, he became very argumentative with her publicly. And Doug Linkhart, who is the representative who came to our February meetings, had suggested that if your city manager is arguing with council members in public, that is a form of insubordination. And again, because of the way our news is reported, you may not know that these issues have been happening, but it leads us to have concerns about those relationships and whose interests are being served if our council members cannot get the information that they need and want to do their jobs. And the city management office becomes argumentative with them or withholds information or refuses to respond to them. We want transparency from all levels of government. I think the example I gave you is a perfect example of transparency of us taxpayers not knowing that there was a problem between our council members and city management staff and the mayor. And as a matter of fact, we had gone the previous year, Renee and I, to meet with the mayor and about an issue that we had a problem with. And the mayor said, well, I can't do anything about it. I don't run the day-to-day operations of the city. I'm just one of 7 people. I'm just a council member at large. But we did see after that shooting happened downtown that the mayor was pretty much running solo. In other words, she wasn't consulting with her colleagues about meetings and their engagement with Munchoy on campus. And so all of a sudden, this shooting became a way to attack sheltered people. And so at least 3 of our council members were morally and ethically balanced enough to say, hey, this is not an appropriate conversation, but they got pushback from their other colleagues. So that transparency is really important because it drives us having people-centered policies, especially if they are actively listening to us. We want stronger council direction and oversight. One of the things that came out of the first meeting that we had with Doug Linkhart was that the council's job is to really send explicit directions to the city manager and to hold them accountable. And so if you watch council, you would see that there would be back and forth about, well, we asked for this and we didn't get that. And at one point, part of the argument I think that Valerie was having with DeCarlin was she'd asked for something several times and he hadn't produced it. And the outcome of that is they actually created a document that is live for when the council asks for something and it goes in this document so they can keep track. But prior to that, they had no mechanism in place to keep track of requests that they made and follow up. So the document serves as an accountability matrix for issues that they want to get more information about. And it says we want to
Could
trust.
I add one thing to that?
Yes.
That last one is another piece of the puzzle there is that they also need to develop a disciplinary process for how council can address issues that aren't being covered by the city manager. And so that's a second thing that they need to add to it, but they haven't addressed that yet. So sorry, go ahead.
No, and I think that's an important point that Renee's making, because we actually have 3 new council members, and they're trying to get their bearings of understanding how this all works. And so I think that there's a belief that the mayor and Nick and are progressive, but if you're watching, you'll see that the mayor and Nick pretty much vote lockstep with the conservative side of the council. And so I know that council members are nonpartisan, but I think people really need to pay attention to the directions that the council is giving the city manager and what they're supporting and what they're not supporting, and what kind of data and outcomes are you seeing that those decisions are actually productive, right? That what they're choosing to do has an outcome that is equitable, and it's not like we're just chasing the wagon. So we want to trust the formal public process and want transparency in the informal process. And I think the discussions that we were having about the shooting downtown, and they're formally trying to get information, and then informally us not knowing that this is going on, but seeing Mun Choi basically try to run roughshod over our council was of a bizarre scenario for us. So we needed a lot more transparency at that time. I ended up making a public records request for documents related to the shooting and the meetings that they were having with Mun Choi, and I didn't actually get those records until February, and I had made my request in December. So it took a long time for me to get information about what was going on and what was being said, and that's another conversation altogether. We expect equity and efficiency, not fear of political retaliation. There was another situation that happened recently. It goes back to the conversation I was having about Maria Arpaio and her asking about risk management, and that cadre of folks being moved from finance to under the purview of legal. And when Valerie Carroll tried to ask about this and ask for a report about why this decision was made, her colleagues, Nick Foster, Barbara, and Dawn and Betsy, voted against her getting the report. And what's interesting is that decision was made actually 2 years ago, well before Valerie was on the council. And so I thought, well, why would they vote against their colleague getting information about something that happened that she didn't even vote on, but was relevant, right? And so Barbara brought up, well, we've been asking for too many reports. It didn't make any sense to me. I ended up transcribing the whole conversation and sending it to the city manager and saying, like, why would you just not answer her question? Why would you make this political like this? Why would you allow your finance director to basically throw Maria Arpaio and the committee under the bus and say they were bored, and that's why they were asking about this? It wasn't a clear conversation for why they didn't want to give her the information. But to me, it looked like political retaliation for asking questions, right? For wanting to get more information. And we think that that's super problematic. I did notice also at the time that every year for some time, the city has put up their risk management reports every year. And I noticed that the reports for 2024 and 2025 were not online, and nor were the reports online for 2021 and 2022. And I did some analysis, and their numbers are not adding up. Things don't look right. And so the sort of the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. But when people start asking questions, there seems to be like a grip tightening going on information. We want reforms to the existing charter and cultural change that supports a healthy council and city ecosystem. And so that example that I gave you about Maria Arpaio and risk management, to me, showed like there's a dysfunction going on, that a part of the council would vote against another council member for wanting information. Interestingly enough, I think it was the mayor, someone said, well, we talked about this in one of our retreats. Well, that's not transparent. If you have minutes and you can show that, hey, here's the conversation we had, or here's the PowerPoint, but they're not able to do that. And what it meant was they hadn't had, at least no one said it publicly, oh, on this day, we discussed this at a council meeting or at a work session. So it seems like there's kind of a unhealthy power struggle going on that prohibits a free sharing of public information, even with council members who need that to do their job. And just remember that council people are very, very part-time. They get a very, very small stipend for that job. And also they don't have any staff that works for them. So they're very dependent on the city manager for being very truthful and transparent with them. When I lived in Long Beach, our city council members had their own staff. And so the staff could do their homework on the things that the city manager presented, and could be a check on his power and a check on, what he was presenting as fact. So we would like to see our council be able to move into a real city sort of environment, not like a village or small town sort of apparatus that's at play right now, in our view. And then, is that it? I think that's my last slide there. I'm going to
We lose your audio?
She looks frozen.
Yeah. Okay, it's gone.
Oh, too bad, Traci.
She should sign back in and
She's
just second.
back.
There she is. We
There you
lost
are,
you.
okay.
We were like, where did she
I
go?
told you I'm totally horrible at the Zoom business. I do this every time. Anyway, let me try to share screen again and see if I can get my other document up here. I have one more. Yeah, here it is. I hope you guys can all see this. It's a model charter city. These are comparing equity against the traditional pillar of efficiency. Can you see this, David?
I don't see it yet.
All right. Let me see. Where am I at here? Okay, let me see. Share.
Now I'm beginning to see something. There we go.
That's the wrong one. Okay. Sorry, I had to bounce around there a little bit. Do you
There
see
it
it? Sorry about that, guys. All right. So here you can, it's just a chart, and I think I emailed this to you to start, but it just compares that model city document of what it was traditionally, right? To address structural waste and corruption. And now we need to look at disparities in social inequity. Before, it was highest level of government performance and economical use of resources. Now it's about fairness and justice by recognizing and alleviating disparities across different population groups. So this is a very different way of thinking about how we manage resources and how we manage money, including an equity lens to analyze problems and define success and reshape decisions across all of our departments. So from our point of view, we're really asking for the city to have a very different kind of engagement with problems. And it takes more than having one-way conversations. I know there are a lot of complaints about the mayor's social media, and that there's only one way. And so, and they've been having conversations about, we're going to have this new way of communicating with the public, and we're going to have this new system. that is yet to be seen. And I'm a public relations person by trade, and I'm very skeptical of what they have proposed so far. So we will let it play out. But you'll see then the first column is the feature, the historical context, the goals, the performance measurements, the structure, public interaction, land use strategy. This is a big deal. The land use one, I think for a long time, the city believed, oh, we don't have to charge developers, growth will just pay for itself. It's like magic. And now they're realizing, wow, like all this growth that we didn't take other things into consideration, like how much it costs to provide police service or fire service. So as a consequence, the police department itself, its needs got left behind, right? We used to spend a lot more money in the public health department on low income residents. I think in 1980, they spent about $50 a low income resident. I think now it's under $20. And so also we know from seeing the community trends documentation report that the city puts out that poverty among our marginalized population has actually increased considerably. It's like 40%. So, and we, for a land grant city, it seems really wild that we would have a high propensity of poverty that we do compared to other cities. So that's just something to keep in mind. Anyway, I pulled this together from the Model Charter Cities document, and I just summarized again in the context of a model charter city, which used to be like the 3 E's: efficiency, effectiveness, and ethics. Now they want us to add in civic engagement and social equity. And I think in the bigger stream of things, even in the macro, that is the conflict that we are having with some of our government officials who are like, well, we need to do this subsidy for this rich person or this rich organization, but we're going to cut things for education, and we're going to cut things for people with disabilities. We're going to cut, make it difficult to get reproductive care. We're going to make it difficult to get mental health treatment. And these are, equity is not just about race, but it's also about meeting the needs of people from, all walks of life who have different kinds of needs. And we don't all start from the same place, and we don't finish at the same place. So it does require us to think a little bit more deeply about the problems that we have and how we go about solving them. So
Christina
I think
Hartman has a question. Sorry to interrupt.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Someone has a question for me?
Christina
Yes,
Hartman.
Christina.
Hey, Tracy,
Thank-
I like the structure you have there with like the difference between what had been done and being a more equitable.
Yeah.
My question would be like, would you see that be something that the city council members raise to have work sessions on, or do you see this at like how do you suppose we should be using that framework, or did I miss that part of your talk?
No, I think for us there's two things. One is that we wanted to demonstrate that there's been a shift in thinking in terms of the city manager form of government and their role, right? The public policy role. And so I would hope that we are hiring city managers that are coming in with that kind of experience. I'm saying something, but I'm not saying something. But at the same time, I'm not sure that all the things that we need to change are, need to be are things that have to be done by charter reform. In other words, are things that the city council can do that are fairly easy, like having gender neutral language, for example. But also in doing this, we were not directing it to like say, hey, council, we want you to do this. What we were saying is we recognize that there is a struggle going on there between the council and the staff and the city manager. And we wanted to put a name to it, which is you have this governing document that tells you how government should run. And with our own eyes, we are seeing there's a problem. So we think most people do not know that this is what a city charter is supposed to do, and that there's been a shift in what public policy should be doing in municipalities. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, that, Traci, has been a wonderful overview, and even your accounts of some, let's say, unpublished conversations that, were very fair and thoughtful, I thought, for us to think about. We heard a little bit of that from in a couple other meetings that a few of us went to, but not all in one piece with regard to the charter. Our time is getting short because this is really important, interesting stuff. So could we move on to some comments from Renee or questions with her? Because I know we have questions in the chat as well.
Let me see what the questions are over here. Does anybody have questions?
Renee, you're muted.
Sorry, that's hard to hear me if I'm muted, right? Sorry.
Well,
Yes.
it happens automatically sometimes, so just pay attention.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. But yes, there were some questions in the chat, and I think I answered most of them. When she was talking about our first meeting, are you talking about the first meeting of Race Matters Friends? And Traci was talking about our first charter review meeting that we had in February.
Another question had to do a little bit with the shooting downtown, but actually the after effect, which was the passing of that so-called safety ordinance without even, I guess, addressing the concerns of 4 different commissions. At least that's what one, Bri or Alice had both mentioned that. Are those two things together, or do they show separate things happening?
What do you mean by those? So they go together in that the shooting happened and the mayor got pulled into this sort of divide and conquer with Munchoy, and Munchoy made this demand that they pass this ordinance. And it's interesting because when the council people were talking, some of them were saying, oh, this is about public safety. But when you make a records request and you get what they're actually saying and how they're labeling it, says we want an anti-pandering ordinance. Well, that's a problem because pandering is legal, and I know people don't like it, but there's a lack of transparency. And if you don't have to share those minutes and you don't make them public, and I have to make a records request and it takes me 2 months or 2.5 months to get the records, that means we get really behind in what the real conversation is.
Well,
right?
Everyone was presuming it had something to do with the chancellor wanting to simply remove homeless people from anywhere near campus, or maybe even the whole city. I don't know. I may be overstating that, but that seemed to be what people were talking about.
I seem to think that Munchoy and some of the business people have some plans for what they'd like to see happen downtown, and that using the unsheltered was a way to bludgeon the city to say, well, we already have some RFPs out. We want to do some development down here, and we'll go to the state and we'll make this a special district, and it'll help with public safety. And so we don't have to come deal with you, city, because we don't think you're not doing the bidding that we want you to do. That's my take on it. I do think that our Len Choi is of a different mindset. He has a very visceral and aggressive position about unsheltered people that is not rooted in what I would say knowledge for someone who has the intellectual capacity he does. He really has a really strong, deep, and unfounded and undocumented, like lack of evidence to support the claims that he's made about people who are unsheltered. Basically, he calls them criminals, homeless criminals.
Homeless criminals. Wow. Well, Renee, you certainly have a background in this area. Were there any comments on that, or are there any other questions in the chat that you wanted to say something about? Or any comments in general about what Traci talked about?
Yeah, well, Bri Mink had made a comment about it should be a fireable offense for the city manager to actively stall or refuse to cooperate with a council member over any reason, especially political reasons that seem like it would be insubordination. And so, yeah, that's true. But I think until the council establishes, first of all, that part of the charter is they supervise the city manager, and that as a group they should be doing that. They should lead strongly and have expectations and follow up on whether or not that has occurred. And they should also have a process and then forms that go with that process so that they'll be able to follow through with that kind of um, disciplinary action against any city manager that doesn't follow through with what they've asked to happen. And while they can't oversee the city manager's staff, they can oversee the city manager and say, we want your staff to do XYZ. And then he's the one that carries the burden of whether or not his staff do what they've directed the city manager to have them do. And so we've got to work and impress upon the council that they have a right to do that, because it's become a piece, kind of like the culture is, oh, we can't do anything, right? The culture is you just have to go along with whatever the city manager or the staff are doing. And so I think that was a very good point, Bri. Thank you for bringing that up.
And Tyler also gave us article and section of that part of the charter. I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yes.
city manager. Now, you said one thing I wanted to ask about. You said any city manager, but you didn't
Right.
mean um, any head of department, because those head of departments are under the
Right.
city manager.
Right.
So
Right.
there
They
was
cannot.
some discussion about the council being unhappy with, certain heads, which I suppose would come up, or there would be pressure to make changes politically. And if the heads don't want to do it, the city manager, I guess, is the guy on the
Yep.
spot right now for trying to make a decision and develop a way of addressing the issue.
Right. He should be showing them documentation of what it is that he has done to try to correct those things.
Mhm.
And in doing that, he should be, if they need to be fired or, disciplined in some way, he should be doing that instead of just coming back and saying, well, I tried. But he needs to show exactly what he's done, and council need to direct him that if staff aren't doing what they're supposed to do, then they need to be fired. So,
Uh, I've worked inside bureaucracies in university, not this one
right,
here, but others. And there was a level at which, there is sunshine for public organizations, but there's also a level in which conversations have to take place that might need to be confidential, at least for a
right,
time. And so I can see how we get down in the weeds sometimes with, well, we can't have these official conversations about this. For one thing, we don't have any ideas together yet. Secondly, if something leaks out that I've said this, then I'll be attacked even if I wasn't holding that. And then thirdly, it might not be fair to someone, say a department head or the city manager, who hadn't even been part of the discussion yet. So I guess, are we all agreed that there has to be some kind of clarity as to what can be a conversation and a idea, crazy idea time, and what has to be accountable and on the record for the public.
right.
So
Well, go ahead, Tracy.
I think that the city has a hard time being the model for having a difficult conversation. So I'm going to just take transparency off the table for the moment, because we shouldn't be discussing what can they say publicly or not publicly, though the rules are really clear on that. They can't talk about HR, they can't talk about real estate, and they can't talk about personnel issues. There really shouldn't be anything related to public services that is a secret. But when they have a conflict like they had with Mun Choi over the shooting, that went on for almost 6 months, right? And that's this back and forth of a power struggle, because the city manager wasn't responding in the way that he should, and neither was the mayor. So when it came out at the retreat, and I actually happened to be there, me and Mike Murphy at the Coma Boys were the only people from the public there, because they had their meeting from 9 to 4. Who can go to a meeting on a Monday from 9 to 4, unless you're retired and that's really your jam and you want to go to one of those meetings? And so it's not really my jam, but I felt like as a citizen, somebody has to do the oversight. There was a reporter that was there, but what that reporter reported based on and what actually happened were not the same thing. She came close, but there was a real struggle in that meeting. And at one point, Betsy Peters told the city manager point blank, "Your communication sucks. You need to fix it now." She said that 3 or 4 times, right? This meeting was so squirrely that Carol Rhodes gave her resignation a few days later or the next day. So you don't know about that because it wasn't reported. I have a recording and a transcript of the meeting, and actually paid a big ton of money to help with that. But we're not getting the information that we need from the city, because they don't want to show that, hey, we're squabbling over who can control the narrative of what's going on. That's how
Remind me again who Rhodes was, and was this a paid position?
Carol Rhodes was the deputy city manager.
Oh, paid position. Yes.
So they're apparently not going to fill that position at the moment. He's got an assistant city manager in Matt Unrein, and he's got a special projects assistant. What's her name? Stacy Renee. I'm not remember her last name. Stacy Brown. Not Stacy Brown. What's her name? Renee. Stacy Weedman. That's Weedman. That's his helps the city manager. So it's very important just to watch the way that the city manager engages with the council and how he answers their questions and how responsive he is to their requests. It's also important to watch the power dynamics of the council and how they react to their colleagues who ask questions, and that the mayor sometimes can get really impatient if somebody asks too many questions. She's actually told them, if you have a lot of questions, don't ask at the council meeting, ask them in advance. And they have something called council inquiry, so they can ask questions and get answers, but they don't give them to us. So if they were clever, they would take that council inquiry every week and put it online so that we can all follow along with, oh, what questions is my council person asking of the city manager? Because it's not like we're getting a report back that says, oh, these are my concerns about XYZ, because we might actually have the same question as the council member. And so if the council member gets their question answered and they don't come back and say, I asked this, this, and this, the only person that does this regularly is Valerie, right? She's very good about this. There are some, Jackie pretty darn good too. They do a much better job than their colleagues by a long shot. But they're understanding that I'm not working for myself. I'm working to keep my constituents informed about what's going on. And some of their colleagues don't like it. So you can see them sort of struggling over, why are they upset? Because this person was asking questions. Isn't that their job? So that's part of the efficiency model in the past, is we don't want you asking a lot of questions because it might take time. And to them, time is more important than getting an issue resolved. It sounds crazy, but that's how it's worked.
Well, I know, I mean, again, being part of organizations, if I'm the chair, I want to make sure it gets done on time and we don't get, go to midnight getting nothing done. So I have a certain amount of sympathy for that point of view. But if the important questions are it all sounds to me like it exploded at the time of the downtown shooting and then the ordinance that came after that there might have been, especially when we heard from the labor representative in one of the other meetings I attended, there might have been other things going on all the time that wanted this better communication and clearer and transparency, as you're talking about. What about the new communications department or new communications hires that we're getting in the city?
So I'm going to go
Or
backwards.
no, that's in the Columbia Public Schools, isn't it? Not in the city.
No. It's with the city. But what I will say is that there have been multiple communication blow-ups that have happened that have escaped what I would say mature coverage. Probably the person who covers it the most and more critically is Mike Murphy on Como Buzz, right? But I think that I think the Murphy campaign exposed a lot of division, and but it was all still going on before then. What's going on right now is the city manager, because he was getting pressure from the council, said, here's my new communications strategy. Now, to be honest, I think that the communication strategy is discombobulated for lots of reasons, but I don't think that they, as a organization, is know what it means to work across their silos. Everybody has their separate silos, and they don't know how to share and leverage their talking points to get information across in a way that's meaningful. I will say the school district has the same problem. I think they have the same sort of, difficulty with messaging, and this is the message discipline. So I see Alice's note here about asking Jackie Sample to do something. I just want to say that I once asked for public records when Betsy Peters had owned a what are those things called, Renee? The what
House
are they
shares.
called? Huh?
Like, you're talking about the Airbnbs.
Yeah. So the city attorney allowed her to not disclose it, right? So we started making records requests to get disclosures. Some people had not even filled out any kind of financial disclosure stuff until I made the request, because I could see the date where they actually had to file it out. They hadn't filed it. So I'm saying that there's a looseness going on there that allows some misbehavior, some stalling on getting records. Renee, we Race Matters Friends made a records request last year. It cost us $1,300. And we did not get that request I took several months, right, to get it. And then when we got it in batches of like 2,700 pages of one file, 2,000. So,
right.
Luckily,
it was around 6 months before we got the whole batch of them.
So they also will refuse to give information to council, like I said, like the one about risk management. Like, why would you refuse that? Why would you refuse to give them reports on problem properties and things like that? So there are lots of things that were going on way before the shooting that were problematic. And because we have limited journalism with the demise of the Tribune, and also that our student reporters are only here in a transitory way. They're here for a semester. They're gone for the summer. We aren't getting the kind of news coverage that we should get for the kind of town that we have as a land-grant institution with a very robust healthcare hub and large school district and all that other kind of stuff. So and we also don't have a robust communication apparatus out of the city, constituents really get piecemeal understanding of what's going on. And so Renee and I will tell you that it's very different to watch a council meeting online versus being there in person, because you get to see a lot of the power dynamics when you're in person about how they treat each other, who gets up and walks off when someone's talking, when they roll their eyes at the public, if they're on their phone the whole time. I mean, it's a really interesting performance of public service at a lot of our meetings. Not for all of them, but there is definitely a difference between Valerie, Vera, and Jackie, and our other 4 council members.
You mentioned Devin once. Devin McTighe is on our call today. She's been with us before. She's the Boone County Democrats media specialist, I think social media. So this is a very good topic for her to take in and think about as well. Because we expect them to come after the Democrats as an organization at any time.
Actually,
And,
today I'll point out something that I had uncovered today as far as Republican operations and how they're going to move with us, So there is a sign that's up at Woodcrest Church, right? That's
right.
For
Yeah.
Don Waterman. Well, come to find out, that sign was paid for by the school, not by the church. And so that's because that land is on the school's property. It's school property, and it's privately funded by the Herzog Foundation, which means they got Herzog money in Columbia funding political stuff is what's going on. I'm waiting for that MEC report to drop so we can find out what's going on. So these are the kind of things that the city council is doing. And also yesterday, I want to point out that Don, on the city's dime, got a free campaign event because he got to do his Let's Talk yesterday.
Yeah.
For the 5th Ward. That's a free campaign event on the city's dime, and they're skirting rules to make this stuff happen. So when Traci talks about the disconnect with the council, I'm witnessing this stuff with her as well. She's not just saying this stuff. Like, I've seen it as well. I've seen Betsy get up and walk out of city council when DeCarlin started talking.
Wow.
I've witnessed those kind of things. So it's the disconnect with the council is something to pay attention for, mainly because if we want to have good leaders, we got to pay attention to the leaders we got to make sure that they're doing the work that we want them to be doing and not bickering with each other and actually focusing on the problems that we need to get fixed.
Okay, you started out by saying that this was a school or a church where we hold elections, right?
They used to be a polling place, but
not anymore.
But they've dropped out for this particular election is when they dropped out.
Okay,
and a place, and now they have the sign up.
Of course, okay.
With Don Waterman, but the school and the church itself is owned by something called the Columbia Academic Learning and Education Academy, or CALE, and so that's how they're skirting the rules.
Okay, so our polling places are still in the hands of the county clerk, I hope.
Yes,
I know there are concerns about some of those locations, and now we see why, I think. But we hope our county clerk will be vigilant about the rules. Oh boy, what else am I getting in here? We're kind of getting toward the end. And we should not go too long. Most I see here are comments and not further questions. Am I missing something? Anybody else want to give us one of our last questions? Folks, we've only just begun, but this has been so helpful because for a couple of months we've been struggling to get somebody to talk about what they know so far. Obviously, everybody admits they have no idea what's going on because nothing's being revealed. and
Exactly.
That we understand. That we understand how it's a process. We will be demanding, I think, after these conversations, that things should come out in an orderly fashion with buy-in and representation of everybody, that they should not be, certainly not be disrespecting the voices of council members. That's something I'm concerned about, of course.
So I want to remind everyone too that it was a cabal of people like Caleb Rowden and Brian Treese and Jim Yankee. They were the ones who were organizing, and I just posted that little document in there that they were floating around, that Andrew Hutchison was sort of shopping for them very quietly to
Right.
do this charter reform stuff. And so we did not feel that that was appropriate. And I actually went on Como Buzz Radio and said, I don't think that this is the way to do this. And I think that part of the reason they were doing it that way is there's a belief on council, whether they want to admit it or not, that they don't want to fire the city manager because he's Black, and they don't want to be called a racist. And what I have said is it's not racist to fire somebody who's incompetent. But if nobody understands what incompetence is, and nobody will address moments of egregious incompetence, then that is a big problem, because that means people are avoiding conflict, they're adverse to conflict, and they're kicking the can on solving public policy issues because they're looking at some kind of optics, I think, that's not even there. So that's my perception. And, I try to get a hold of them to come talk with us. And I think they've sort of dropped their ball for now. But yes, Caleb was the acting campaign manager for Don Waterman, I think. But anyway, Renee, I'm sorry, did I forget something?
Well, I just wanted to announce our next upcoming event with Doug Linkhart from the National Civic League. He's the president of that league, and he has a long history of experience with government. But we'll have the event, and it will be on the Civic Index, which is a way to measure a community's civic capital. And so he's going to speak to us about that and work with us on it. And it'll be held at the Columbia Public Library on April 29th. And the event will start at 6:30, but we will have food at 6. So I'll send out more information later on that. So.
Well, I thank you very much. I tell you, that first part, Traci, I think you should have that ready for a lot of presentations as these things get started with various groups, and maybe share it with other people who can do the same thing, because you really gave us a pretty solid overview to go for, where we were going from particular issues that we thought we'd heard something about. I mean, this is a really systematic, important thing for a city our size, I think, meeting the great challenges that we have before us today. And so I really am pleased that you worked with Kathy Jensen today to make this presentation to us, Renee and Traci. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Much appreciated.
We do. Thank you.
We'll have a few announcements and maybe a little discussion for maybe